Hi, so this is going to be a different type of video. I want to start making discussion videos about types of advice to improve at OSU and ways to look at the game. I said in a previous comment that I was going to try to make discussion videos, so these are mainly organizing thoughts about this game that I have in my head. A few disclaimers before I start is one, this is going to be an audio recording, so there's not going to be anything shown on video, which means you're free to do other stuff while listening to this recording. Think of it like a podcast. It's what I want to do, at least at the beginning. Second disclaimer is that I'm not claiming any of my opinions to be fact, and I encourage you, if you do not agree with my opinion on something or what I want to say about something, then feel free to open a discussion so we can, reach a collective truth together. Because, I only have one brain to work with, and I'm not able to look at every possible perspective. So, feedback is greatly appreciated. Anyway, disclaimers aside, let's get started. I want to talk about improvement in specific skill sets on OSU, especially your weaknesses. Every person has a skill set that they are more naturally good and less naturally good at. Uh, that's just the thing with not only OSU, but just everything in games or in life, even. Uh, I know there are a lot of players who are considered to be quote unquote all rounders, but before they got to the all rounder status, they were usually strong at one thing and weak in others. They just managed to practice their weaknesses so they can reach that all rounder status. But, you know, generally speaking, there will still be parts of your skill sets that you will be weaker on than others. To use me as an example, my strengths, I believe, were always with finger control, flow aim, and accuracy. I don't think I'm the best, but I think I'm pretty good. On the contrary, my weaknesses have always been jump aim, stamina, like really intensive stream stamina, and very high speed. After playing OSI for about a year, I started realizing those weaknesses with my skill sets. Usually, after a certain time period, you realize what you're good at and what you're less good at. And the first thought that came to my mind was, okay, that's great. I'm going to keep playing my weaknesses until I get good at them enough. And so I did. It was back around 2015 where I would play more A maps and stray maps and speed maps, and I tried to improve at them. Uh, I would hyper focus on my weaknesses, and I would only play those for like absurd amounts, like 6 hours a day back in like 2015. I thought back then that it was the fastest way to improve at my weaknesses. However, after a while, I realized one thing is that I wasn't improving at my weaknesses despite hyper focusing on them. In fact, I was actually getting worse at them, meaning the more I played my weaknesses in a session, the less I was able to do well on those same skill sets, right? And my first thought was always, wait a second, that does not make any sense. How come I don't improve at my weaknesses despite playing them sometimes for 5, 6, like I said, 5, 6 hours a day? And for the longest time, I could just not figure out why that phenomenon would happen. Um, I still don't really know the answer, but I have a theory of why that was the case. Um, when you play your weakness, or really anything you're bad at, your brain needs time to quote unquote sit on it, which means there needs to be time of rest between where your brain processes what you just played and gets better at them. Like your brain needs time to relax and process everything you've learned on that session. Your muscles and brain need time to rest so they can rebuild themselves. There have been researches saying that rest is where the actual improvement process happens, not when you actually practice at something. So it's the time when your muscles rebuild themselves. Your brain and body simply, in my opinion, they just get too tired from training. So that's why performance got reduced. To bring back to my example of me just getting worse on a weakness when I was practicing it for 6 hours a day, my brain and body just got too tired, and so performance was just reduced, right? Like think about a pretty common example is when you play speed maps and you play a lot of speed maps for one day, and then the next day you lose all your speed and you don't realize, like, wait, why did I lose all my speed if I practiced it the all time, like all day yesterday? And your muscles got tired and weak and they need time to rest and build themselves again. That's essentially, I think, what happened on a broader scale, on a broader level. um but that's not the only reason, in my opinion. Another reason is that Osu is a game that requires more than one skill set to be able to play a map well. For example, if you want to play stamina maps well, the fact is most stamina maps in the game that are ranked have jumps in them, for example. So if you play stamina for 5 hours every day and then you come back to ranked maps playing, like, to ranked stamina maps thinking that your performance is going to be increased by a lot. Well, the fact is that stamina isn't the only thing that is required to play those maps properly. You need flowing, you need jumping, you need consistency. You need all these other skill sets that you can't simply gain by practicing only one skill set. So, when you hyperfocus on one skill set, even your weaknesses, it means neglecting all the other skills you have learned in order to only learn one thing. So suddenly, when you come back to playing that same ranked map, you need to bring all of these skills back to the forefront of your brain. And hell, you might even need to de-rust at them, which would kind of defeat the purpose of training, right? There's a reason why playing the long maps, those long stream practice maps, does not really translate to playing stream maps in general. And it's because streaming requires more than just raw stamina. It requires, finger control. It requires good technique. It requires you being comfortable with aiming a map, with tapping the BPM, stuff like that. So I've rambled a lot about, like, my noticing of certain aspects while I was trying to practice and what happened. So the real question is now, okay, what do we do from now? Does that mean practicing your weakness is a bad thing and that you should never do it? Well, I don't think so. You're not magically going to get better at your weaknesses if you don't practice them. However, hyper focusing on one skill set and playing only it for a session, for multiple sessions, for days, weeks, will yield opposite results. The way that worked the best for me from experience was integrating more than playing one skill sets in a session. You know, jumps, streams, slow maps, fast maps, tech maps, whatever it is, like DT, Hard Rock, all mods, all potential styles of maps that you can include to kind of like gauge a baseline of your skill. And a good example of way to practice all of those skill sets at the same time would be tournaments. Tournament pools are, in my opinion, a really good way to integrate all of those skill sets together into a session, especially nowadays when the meta is very rigid with tournaments and that you know what maps you're going to get into while playing them. What I've actually realized is it's actually, the times I have been the most active in tournaments where my weaknesses were not showing as much as they used to. which is it's weird to think about, but it's just how it always have been for me. Um, the reason for that is I assume it's because playing so many other skill sets and not hyper focusing on only one had my brain time to rest and sit on my weaknesses so it can learn how to pull the practice up when I needed it to. So, what's the main moral point of what I'm trying to say? When you want to practice your weakness, definitely practice your weaknesses. Like, do not neglect your weaknesses. Uh, don't if you want to get better at jumps, don't just not play jump aim for 8 months and then come back and think you're going to be good at jump aim. That's not how it works. Definitely practice your weakness, but don't just focus on that weakness. You need to reach a balance, I think. The goal is to reach a balance between practicing your weaknesses and perfecting your strengths in one session with without extreme hyper focusing. It just gives your brain to do other stuff, whether it be, other skill sets in OSU or even other stuff. That's why taking breaks is important because you need to have your brain rest on something. Like when your brain sleeps on a skill, then it just kind of learns what it did yesterday and gets better at it the next time. That's what I wanted to talk about in a nutshell. Hopefully you took something from this video, and if you have something you agree or disagree with, then feel free to let me know, and I'm always open for discussion. I do have more ideas I plan to talk about. I'm gonna see how this video goes, and if people are down for more listening stuff to stuff like this, then I'll try to do more. Thanks for listening.